This is the Friday, May 31st, 2019 version of the Market Plus segment. Joining us again is Dan Hueber. Dan, welcome back.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Dan, we got a lot of questions this week for you, most of them weather related.
Oh, certainly.
So we've got to take a couple of good ones here I picked out. Interesting one to start off the discussion here. We've got Phil in Dresden, Ontario, always sends in great questions. He said, is what we're experiencing now in the grain markets a black swan event?
Oh, certainly classic black swan event, realistically. So black swan event by definition is something that surprises everybody, changes things, generally on a temporary basis. I mean, it's not necessarily a long-term change. And I think he really had developed a market situation where a lot of people just really became kind of complacent about the corn supply, well, the world supply situation in grain, soybeans, period, thinking there was nothing you could throw at the market that would really upset things. And of course, this unusual spring has done just that, and it's thrown everybody a curveball, and the market didn't expect it. As witnessed by coming into it, we had the funds massively short, and could not have been in a wrong of position. And of course, now that's been a lot of the buying here over the last 2 weeks, is bringing those people back out of that position.
Typically, I thought black swan events were supposed to be negative impacts on the market, but it sounds like that's not necessarily the case.
Oh, well, I think really a black swan, again, by definition, is just something that surprises, unexpected event that takes everybody by surprise, and is big enough that it creates a shift, at least temporarily, in the underlying fundamentals of that individual market or economy or whatever the case may be.
Okay,
so,
which it definitely has.
Absolutely, this year it has.
All right, Dan, this is an interesting question. I'm interested to see what your answer is. We've got Tim in Spurlin, Illinois, said, is it worth trying to plant? And I assume he's probably talking about corn, given the time.
Sure. I mean, certainly many different things you got to take into consideration at this point. I mean, one, of course, geographically, where are you located? I mean, Illinois, we have up till the 5th of June for prevented plant. We know that insurance starts to ratchet down 1% a day after that point until the 15th of the month. But I think it's really an individual economic decision for, do we continue to plant? Do I switch to beans? Do I take prevented plant? And leave the ground, take the payment from the insurance company? None of them are easy. I mean, none of them are blanket answers for any operation. One thing to keep in perspective is we do know there is a government aid package that's going to be issued this year,
which we don't know yet.
Well, we don't know exactly how it's going to
be right,
but we do know if you don't plant, you will not be eligible for.
Well, I even heard an announcement today by Secretary Perdue. He refused to comment on whether or not prevent plant acres would or wouldn't be included.
Oh, is that right? Okay, well, maybe they could be backpedaling a bit there. So,
I don't know. It's hard to say at this point.
Right.
So this poses, I think, the perfect setup for then a follow-up question, which we got from Chris in Cuba City, Wisconsin. He said, how high do new crop corn futures need to trade at to encourage some of those states, especially Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio, to produce, knowing that they could have, an 80% yield drag or production at this point?
Well, I think you really should throw South Dakota in the mix, because that is the second highest acreage state yet to be planted is out there, and of course they're being that much further north geographically makes the question even more challenging. I tend to think that's really what the market's searching for right now. I mean, that is what led us on a dollar rally in the last 2 weeks in the corn market. Is that enough to give people incentive to plant at later dates? In our area, I can speak to Northern Illinois. I spoke with a lot of farmers in the last week, and yes, it is. I mean, I think at this point they'd say, I'm willing to go out till the 15th of the month, take the reduction in the crop insurance coverage if prices are at this level. I still have the incentive to plant. Some areas where you just have that shorter window of time to raise the crop, that may not be the case. So it's again, it's region to region, farm to farm on how that decision is made. But boy, it's time to really sit down with probably your lender, your crop insurance agent, and put a good hard pencil to this to see if it makes sense on your operations. And of course for livestock feeders, you may not have that luxury either. Particularly for forage crops, that we've just got to get the crop on the ground and. Because we're going to need that feed ultimately. So.
And Dan, you've done a lot of traveling here over the past week, 2 weeks, Midwest, even out to the Carolinas.
Right.
What have you seen in the field?
Pretty stunning. Pretty stunning. And again, I've been in agriculture all my life. I've been in this business for over 40 years now, and really have never seen anything not only this widespread, but of course the problem at this time of the year. And I can think of years where individual areas had very wet springs, and even 2 years ago, in southern Ohio. Very wet spring. They ultimately got the corn planted, most of it after June 1st, and came back with record crops. But I mean, that was just a freakishly unusual summer where that to enable that to happen. Statistically, it's hard to imagine how that could change this year. But boy, to drive, and again, I should count up the miles, but I mean, we're probably looking 1,500 miles total. And it was a rarity to see a field of corn that was over 2 inches tall. I mean, for this time of the year, and particularly in the central Illinois, southern Indiana, Missouri, that was just a bit shocking to see.
The old adage, knee high by 4th of July, might not be the case this year.
Exactly, 4th of something, but not July. So, yeah.
So the other question I think that maybe a lot of people haven't been talking about, but we did have a question sent in to us this week from Rod in Seneca, Kansas. He said, of the corn planted, how much do we have to replant, or will it just be abandoned because we can't get into it?
Well, at this point, if the rains don't stop, there won't be a choice to replant it. I think it's just abandoned acres, and that goes back to what we discussed earlier, that we probably are going to have a little wider percentage difference between planted and harvested acres this year, just because there will not be that opportunity to replant. Some areas, certainly and we've seen it all in the past, where those wet holes may, if things turn out properly, they may turn up with beans in those wet holes later on, and instead of taking the insurance payment on it, but probably one of the biggest, I shouldn't say the biggest, but one of the decisions, part of it now, is what kind of a drag is this going to create on people's APHs? So this is a problem that could haunt us for years in lower productivity, lower guarantees on our insurance. So it unfortunately is not going to go away from the economic level in the farm sector for some time.
I hadn't even thought about that, changing the APH levels for producers too.
Oh, sure.
Definitely another issue.
Right.
Okay, we've talked about corn acreage and soybean acreage. One thing we didn't get to talk about in the show was cotton acreage that we see. We've got a question here from Quentin in Spearman, Texas.
Sure.
How much planted corn and cotton do we lose if we can't shake this weather pattern? Let's talk cotton, because we did address corn during the main show.
Well, of course, a little larger window to get the cotton in there, and of course, the cotton market was absolutely, of course, devastated by those last reports that came out from the government. I think took everybody by shock. Sent December cotton down sub 70-cent level there. So at least we seem to have stabilized here at this point in time. So I think it's a little bit premature to really to throw up the flag on cotton and say, we're going to lose enough acres, that particularly with these domestic and world supplies we have out there. The corn's a little easier to define. I think we've got a 2-week window, and I think if whatever we get planted in the next 2 weeks is probably going to be it. So it'd be nice to give it a definitive answer what that's going to be, but I think each week that goes by, that we don't see pretty good progress, or each week that goes by, the market is going to try to either plus or minus the incentive to make that happen. So. Here again too, we can't control Mother Nature. So
that's right.
If it doesn't agree, we just have to deal with the after effects with it.
Definitely. So in talking about the cotton market in particular, we've been trading in a little bit of a sideways pattern here. Are we going to break out to the upside or the downside?
Everything I've been watching here in the last couple of weeks says we're setting the foundation, setting the stage for a push to the upside. Is that a massive bull market? No, it would be a stretch to, that's not unlike maybe not quite as dramatic as the bean market, but I think similar to the beans, if we do pop to the upside, if we could rally back into the 71 to 73 cents in December cotton, I think I'd be tickled pink for at least the initial rally. So.
Okay, I like that. Tickled pink.
There we go.
All right, Dan, we've got one final question for you. Lots of great questions this week. Matt and Clive, Iowa, sent in the question, what's the possibility of higher ending 2018 corn stocks with the slow export demand? And what ending stocks number would reverse the upward trend in the corn market? With what we're dealing with today, the idea of a higher ending stocks, I think, is a real stretch. It's and again, I think the USDA was already trimming back on usage numbers. Yes, higher prices should begin to curtail some of the demand, be that export or even domestic. But domestically, as we spoke earlier, we have hog numbers that are on the increase, poultry numbers that seem to be growing, cattle numbers that are stable to growing. So domestic demand looks pretty solid. Ethanol could be,
yes, we had the change today where we're going to see a little more usage year-round on ethanol.
Really, does that change a whole lot?
It isn't going to. I mean, that's more of a psychological boost than anything. But if I'm correct in thinking that we're going to be down at least 5 million acres from what we initially thought, we would have to have very substantial increases in yields, which statistically all odds are against that as well. With even with the late plant and the way the seed sat in the ground from the earlier planted corn, so to make ending stocks grow from here, I think would be very challenging.
Very challenging.
Very
all
challenging.
right, Dan Hueber, thank you so much.
Certainly, thank you much.
Join us again next week when we'll explore how a diverse set of Western stakeholders are seeking common ground on public lands. And Elaine Cubb will join us at the Market to Market table. Until then, thanks for watching, listening, or reading. I'm Delaney Howell. Have a great week.